Right. All right, folks. So good evening and thank you so much for joining this session. And for the folks who would be viewing this session later, once we publish the recording, good evening or good afternoon or good morning based upon wherever you would be seeing this session from. So let's get started. So today's session, as you can see, is getting started with Microsoft Defender for Identity, and this is part one. So if you're someone who has been viewing our webinar series or who has been joining our webinar series, you would understand that this is a Microsoft Defender XDR webinar series, wherein prior to this, we have discussed in detail about what is Microsoft Defender for Office 365, what is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and today in this very session, we'll be talking about how to get started with Microsoft Defender for Identity. So my name is Vignesh Ganeshan, and followed by me, I have my co-speaker who is Samik Roy. So a little bit about myself. So I work as an enterprise architect. I'm also a security and a Microsoft 365 MVP, and I'm also an MCT. I've been in the industry for almost close to 14 years now. Been doing a lot of Microsoft 365, Azure, and security a lot of late. So with that, let me ask Samik to introduce himself. Samik, over to you.
Thank you, Vignesh, and myself, Samik Roy, based out of India, and I'm a Microsoft MVP in the area of security, and author of a book on security language, and I've been there in industry for 12 years now, helping customers to implement security and make the best out of the products there. So with that, over to you, Vignesh.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure that I'm setting the right expectations of this webinar series. So if you're somebody who's joining our session for the very first time, I want to make sure that you understand what you're signing up for, right? So the targeted audiences for this webinar series are Microsoft 365 admins, architects. Maybe you're somebody who's coming from the Microsoft 365 world, so you're more focused on that. So you're a good, and this webinar works perfectly for you. Or you could be somebody who's coming from the Azure side of things, wherein you're working as a cloud engineer or a Azure architect or a solution architect, and this webinar session will work perfectly for you too. Or maybe you're somebody who's coming from a IT security background. For instance, you're somebody who's coming from a cybersecurity background, but we want to make sure that you have a good understanding of Microsoft 365 and Azure, because in this webinar series, our core focus is to talk about Microsoft Defender XDR, but we won't be talking about the basics of Microsoft 365 and Azure. That is something that we expect you to already have a knowledge on before joining this webinar series. So the end goal is to make sure that you all walk out of this session having a in-depth or a good understanding of Microsoft Defender XDR products. We want to make sure that you understand what the product means, what are the different implementation methods, how does the licensing work, and also some best practices that we'll be discussing during this session. Key takeaways, as I said, we want to make sure that you have a good understanding of Microsoft Defender XDR as a whole, what it means to have a what it means to have a Defender XDR, and what is that what can that do for your organization. We also want to make sure that you understand the different products and suites within Microsoft Defender XDR, and we also want to make sure that you as an IT professional, or you as a whatever background you're coming from, right, you understand why XDR is even important for an organization. What is the key role it's playing, right? Once I bring in XDR, what is the business value, or what's the value that I'm going to get out of this product, right? We want to make sure that you understand all of this thing, and that will be the core key takeaways from these sessions. So how do we plan to run this webinar series? As I said, we plan to do this as bi-weekly sessions, but there has been times wherein, due to our personal commitments or work commitments, we weren't able to stick to that bi-weekly time frame. So at times we end up pushing these webinars like once in 3 weeks or such. But really sorry for that. We'll try to make sure that we stick to our bi-weekly agenda. But the goal is to have about 12 to 15 sessions. We are planning to do at least 3 to 2 sessions per product, so that we are covering as much as possible for each and every single product in the Microsoft Defender XDR suite. So these sessions are planned on a Saturday at 6 p.m. IST. These sessions will also be available for you to watch on demand later on my YouTube channel, and I'll be posting the recordings on LinkedIn. So if at all you're following the YouTube channel, subscribing for the YouTube channel, you'll get all the alerts and stuff. So the timeline that we have planned for these sessions is 60 minutes, wherein the first 50 minutes will be given for the session in itself, and the last 10 minutes will be planned for the Q&A. And at the end of the session, we'll be sharing the Microsoft Forms QR code. So please make sure that you scan that code and give in your feedback. Or also, if at all you want to ask any additional questions which you are not able to ask during the session, you can ask that in the feedback form also, so that we'll get back to you on the next session. All right, so what do we have in house for you? So today we have a very simple agenda. We'll begin by talking about what is Microsoft Defender for Identity. What are the different plans that we have in MDI? Do we have different plans, or is it just one plan? Then we'll be talking about the core capabilities and functionalities of Microsoft Defender for Identity, right? Because as I said, the Microsoft Defender XDR in itself has a lot of products underneath it. It has the Microsoft Defender for Office 365, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Defender for Identity, and then it also has Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. While all these products come together to solve a common goal, each and every single product in itself has something to offer to you, right? So we'll be talking about what is that core capability and functionality which MDI is going to bring to you. Then we'll also be talking about the deployment steps. How do you deploy MDI in your tenant? And then finally, we'll open for Q&A. So that's the agenda. Let's get moving. So the Microsoft Defender XDR, as I said, it's Microsoft's XDR. And when I say an XDR, we've discussed this a lot in the past. It is the ultimate unified defense suite, which is going to take care of your hybrid identities, your endpoints. Your endpoints could be, let's say, workstations. It could be mobile devices. It could be IoT, anything in those lines. So it's going to take care of that also. Then all the data which goes into your email and other collaboration stuff, such as your SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, and Teams and such. And also on other SaaS apps also, the data which is stored on other SaaS apps. This isn't something which is only meant to safeguard the data that you have on Microsoft 365 alone. You could be having data on, let's say, Google Workspace or Dropbox, or it could be a different third-party SaaS storage, but still you can make use of XDR to secure and govern the data which is stored there. And also other cloud workloads also. So what I mean is, this is just because it's a Microsoft product, it's not meant to only take care of a Microsoft product. You can extend it to AWS or Google Workspace and also other cloud solutions too. So at the end, the way you need to look at this solution is, it is a unified defense suite, which is going to take care of all the identities, endpoints, the data which is stored in your M365 repositories or SaaS repositories, and also the other cloud workloads also. And the capabilities which it's going to offer is prevent, protect, detect and respond, and also extend. And as I mentioned in our previous sessions, the prevent and protect is what you get in a P1 offering, and the detect and respond or extend is something that you would get on a P2 offering. Now, there are some products within the XDR suite which has a P1 and P2 split up. Well, there are some products which doesn't have the P1 and P2 split up. You get everything within there. That is just one single license. And we'll talk in detail about that, about how Microsoft Defender for Identity works and stuff like that. So Microsoft Defender for Identity, as the name itself says, so this is first of all, it's a SaaS or cloud solution. And it was previously called as Azure Advanced Threat Protection or Azure ATP, because we all understand the kind of name changes which Microsoft keeps doing quite often. So what this basically does is, this is something which is going to capture the signals from your on-prem Active Directory, right? And also from your Entra ID. It brings in all the signals together, it processes it, and then it is going to look for any, let's say, anomalies or lateral movement or any account which has been compromised. So think of this as a solution which is completely meant to take care of your identities and identities only, right? Like how the Defender for Office 365 is meant for Office, right? Your Defender for Endpoint is meant to take care of endpoints. So similar way, your Defender for Identity is completely just for your identities. And when I say identities, it's just not only the cloud identity, it is also the on-prem accounts also. At a very high level, these are the three things that it does. It's going to protect user identities and reduce the attack surface. It's also going to help to detect threats across modern identity environments, and it is also going to help to investigate alerts and user activities, right? Let's say something happens, right? Now, beyond all this, there is always going to be some sort of attack which is going to happen, right? So if at all later you want to run a postmortem and understand what really happened, where did this attack originate from, what was the impact of it, right? Even those kind of things are also possible using the Defender for Identity. So once we are doing the demo, you can understand in detail about what I'm talking about. So this is the Defender for Identity architecture. As a matter of fact, I like the previous architecture diagram, which was, which really made sense, but I'll try to explain what's happening here. So if you look at this, right? You have your on-prem accounts, which is your Active Directory accounts, which is stored in your Active Directory, right? So you can install your Defender for Identity sensor, which will be showing in the demo, right? You can install this on your domain controllers. It's a sensor, an exe file that you can that you need to literally install on all your domain controllers. Let's say you are an organization which has some 20 domain controllers or 50, depending upon the size of your organization, the domain controllers would vary, right? You literally need to install these sensors on all the domain controllers. Or if at all you also want to monitor your Active Directory Federation service, your ADFS service, and also the certification service. So these are the three places where you can install these sensors, right? And once you install these sensors, it starts capturing all the Windows events and also all the network traffic, and it's going to start sending that to the Defender for Identity, which is sitting in the cloud, right? And then the other thing which it does is you also have signals coming from your Microsoft Entra ID, which is nothing but your cloud identities. It's just not that. You can also have third-party identity providers. This could be Okta, or it could be a different third-party identity provider. So even signals from there also can be integrated, and everything goes to the Defender for Identity, which is part of your Microsoft Defender XDR. And this is the one which is going to look into all the signals which are generated from these three uh, call it as containers, or call it as whatever is coming, right? So all the data which is coming from here, it's going to process it. Then it is going to tell whether there is something happening, whether there are any lateral movements, or somebody hacked into your environment. Maybe they got access to a privileged account and now they're trying to do something. Pretty much everything can be figured out once all the data goes in there. So at a very high level, this is what the architecture looks like. But when we are showing the demo, you'll be able to make much more sense out of this. In terms of the licensing, as I said, there are some products in the Defender XDR suite which has a plan 1 and plan 2. Luckily, Defender for Identity is not such product. You don't have the concept of plan 1 or plan 2. You just have a standalone plan, right? And these are the SKUs which gives you the Defender for Identity capability, right? So you would think that this is already included in the suite that you have. Not really. Sometimes you need to go ahead and purchase this separately also. So as long as you're running a enterprise mobility and security E5 or A5, you already have Defender for Identity with you. Or maybe if you're running a Microsoft 365 E5, A5, or J5, you have it. Or if you're running a Microsoft 365 E5 with the security thing, then you have it, right? So these are all the licensing SKUs which gives you the Defender for Identity. Or if at all you feel that for you as an organization, purchasing this SKUs is going to be a bit costlier, then you can also go ahead and purchase a standalone license also. You also get Defender for Identity as a standalone license. Like how you have the P1 and P2 concept in Entra, the same concept is here. You can also go ahead and purchase it as a standalone license. So what does this offer to me? What are the core capabilities of Microsoft Defender for Identity, right? So it's going to help me to gain visibility with a comprehensive identity inventory. It pretty much has a lot of reports, which is going to talk about what are, if at all there is any attack, what sort of attacks have been happening. It has a lot of inventory information which is stored there, and we'll be showing the demo of it, wherein and these are all useful informations that you as an IT administrator, or maybe if you're a security administrator, you're part of this ISO, or based upon your role, a lot of these reports will be really useful for you. It's also going to highlight the identities that are most at risk. And risk could be anything. It could be a risky sign-in, it could be an impossible travel, or it could be maybe somebody who has got access to one of your global admin accounts, right? So pretty much all the identities which are at risk will be highlighted. It's also going to help to get industry-leading detection spanning the cyber attack lifecycle. That's also something which it generates. It's also going to help you to immediately respond to compromised identities. Let's say an identity has been compromised, right? How do you immediately respond to that? Even that's possible using a Defender for Identity. And finally, bolster your defenses with identity posture assessments. Now, a lot of this may sound like just English to you, but when we are showing the demo, we'll start looking at how this all comes into action, right? So that's when you'll be able to really see this happening, and you can understand how Defender for Identity puts all this together. Okay, so now I think I've done enough talking here. Now let's get into the demo. In the demo, what we want to show you is how do you set up Defender for Identity? How do you start onboarding the service? And how to make use of the dashboard? What are the things that you can see in the dashboard? That's all we want to cover. But before I hand it over to Samik for the demo, there are a couple of things which I want to talk about. Defender for Identity basically has three important components, right? So one is the Defender for Identity portal in itself, which is basically where most of the work happens. So that's, think of it as the management portal wherein you can do all sort of actions. It has a dashboard, you can pull out the reports, uh, the sensors, pretty much everything is there on the portal. Then you also have the Defender for Identity sensor, which is nothing but it's an executable file which you can download, and you need to install this on the domain controllers and also on the Active Directory Federation servers or Active Directory certification servers, if at all you have those, right? And then finally, the Defender for Identity Cloud service in itself. So where exactly this service is set up, right? So this service, it's not a service which is available across the globe. So this is currently deployed in Europe, UK, Switzerland, North America, Central America, Caribbean, Australia, East Asia, and India. So currently, these are the only locations where Defender for Identity Cloud Service is available. And very quickly, if at all I want to talk about, a lot of you might be thinking about, hey, what are some prerequisites for this, right? The licensing ones is something which we just spoke about. These are the licenses that you need to have for you to take advantage of Defender for Identity. In terms of permissions, the least is you should at least have security administrator access, right? And I think that makes sense because for pretty much for you to do any you know high level stuff or privileged stuff on the Defender portal, you would need a security administrator role. So for this, you need the security administrator privilege. In terms of connectivity requirements, because you're going to install the sensors on these on-prem boxes, and the data from the sensor should be talking back to the Defender portal, which means you need to make sure that you have literally whitelisted everything that has to be whitelisted, right? I'm talking about the ports, the firewalls, and stuff like that. And this is all documented. So you need to make sure that you're going through this and you are whitelisting everything, make sure that the firewall isn't blocking anything. And in terms of the servers where you would be installing this, this is the basic, you should be running 2 core 6 GB of RAM. So these are some basic prerequisites, which is the case with any Microsoft product out there. So just make sure that you're going through this documentation so that you understand that these are all the basic prerequisites and you meet it. Okay. So with that, let me hand it over to Samik. So Samik, over to you to show the demo. Thank you.
Thank you, Vignesh. So I would like to start again by sharing my screen first. So let me know once you see my screen. Should be able to see it now
It is
clearly.
coming up. Yep, I can see it now. Yep.
Wonderful. So to get started, right? So I would say, I think by this time, people who are attending it for the first time or people who have attended, if you are not aware, the URL for Microsoft Security Portal is security.microsoft.com, and that's the URL you should log in. And ideally, to log in here, as Vignesh mentioned, to do stuff, you need to be a security admin, but at least you should be a user to log in within the same domain. Then you have a wonderful left navigation laying down all the foundational details over here, which we have already covered some part of it throughout our previous sessions. So today, as we're talking about Defender for Identities, so there are a few things, right? Number one is onboarding, and second is checking stuff that it is working, and third thing is, detecting and protecting things. But even before that, we all know that Active Directory is a sensitive topic, right? So before even we get started, there are a few things I wanted to run you through. So for that, we'd go to identities and go to tools, right? So if I go to tools, it's going to open a next tab. I will let it load. So Microsoft has actually linked a few tools which are really helpful for all of us to look at things. So for example, the documentation. So, and I'm just, walking you through this because at times what happens, we know what are the steps, but we might not find the right resources for the process, and that might cause problems. So to start with, again, I would say documents, and if I click on the document, it's again Microsoft documentation. Not that you need it right away from the beginning, but this is a good thing to keep it handy throughout the process to make sure that kind of you follow the right things and refer back the documentation as and when needed. Then the sizing tool, right? I'm going to open the tool, and again, this is basically again another Microsoft documentation which talks about sizing tool with a little bit of details around kind of how do I say this? This is fundamentally you get the number of inputs and go from there, and that's how you actually do the sizing so that you understand what kind of things you're gonna look at and how are the things you're gonna migrate. And to know more about it, I think I'll jump on to the next, please. I'll go. Here's a link. Actually, you can always review the architecture of identity which Vignesh has shown, also the prerequisites, but the main thing here is Defender identity for sizing tools, which is basically a GitHub. And then I click on this, it's gonna download the tool, and then obviously there is a zip file. If you want to download, you can download, but technically what happens is this gives you a sizing tool, and there you go. So let me see if I can open that real time so that I can show that to you. And obviously I'm going to run the exe which comes with the exe. So, and yeah, that's how you can download and run the tool from here basically, right? So I'll take a moment to look at stuff. And then once you're done with the sizing, the next thing I'm gonna talk about is going back to the previous one. You have a readiness script, you have a PowerShell module to configure if you are like running a huge set of things, which I'll also talk about while I talk about onboarding in just a few seconds. And there's a wonderful documentation also available to install the sizing tool. But for the readiness script, I will close all the things and go to one of my open tabs. So if you look at, there is already one readiness script that's going to check a PowerShell script available. You can go through it in detail, and it's going to check the readiness of your environment to see everything is there as a prerequisite or not. And then the last piece is if you really want to configure something, keep this handy for configuration and go from there. Now, once we have all these details done, or we have the tools handy, then actually what we go is we scroll down and go to systems, go to settings, and because we are in Defender XDR portal, basically you can see all the settings, but we should choose identities as a link here. And once we choose the link here, we're going to see all the respective settings. And as you can see, the first section itself called sensors. So why you call it sensors? Because they are like really lightweight, gonna go and sit in your Active Directory or your domain controllers, and that's where you it's gonna send some data and do some assessment. Now, if we click on add a sensor, which we do, basically there is one access key and there's also a download installer. So what I'm going to do is download this one now. So in real world, you will be downloading this using this access key and then going to your domain controllers. And there is also certain sort of prerequisites which I'm going to also allow, which you should open the port so that this can communicate to the Defender portal, right, and send the data from your domain controllers and also try to respond and identify attacks. So, and as you can see, as Vignesh was talking about, the prior name of this was Azure ADP. So you can see the name still there at cases. I'll let it download. And in the meantime, I will quickly jump on the next service. Now, once this is downloaded and installed, right, you're going to see something like this, right? In some time, you're going to see your domain controllers onboarded, and you can see it is healthy, not healthy, when the time it is created, when it is able to reach or running and things like that. So the basic details of the domain controller, right? Then as an additional configuration, because this is something as a part of configuration which we still are in, we're going to go to directory services accounts. If we want to add a credential here, we just add, and then so that it can be used for your on-premises sensor to connect, right? You can type in an account and add a few accounts here if you need to, right? Then the next manage action account. So what's going to take, like for example, if you really want this to take some actions, you can say automatically use sensors local system account. That means it's going to use your server's local system account, or you can manually create one account or manually tag one domain account, which is supposed to be used for taking actions, right? I would say, okay, leave it. If you're using any VPN, this is the place you can enable stuff, and then you can, with a shared secret, you can enable radius accounting. Then this is the main part. So what we see is, as Vignesh was talking about, right? So Defender for Identity sensor by itself kind of understands some sort of attack patterns which are very, very common. And you really have the thresholds here to tweak them. For example, if we talk about security principal reconnaissance or maybe suspected golden ticket usage, right? So for all these cases, what I'm seeing here is kind of we can tweak that settings as high or low so that according to that the detection triggers immediately, right? That's how it's gonna say. And then there are settings which you can tweak basically, and that's gonna act, or that's gonna get updated in the sensor, and it's gonna act accordingly. uh, about is just to know how the about things, and why about is here, because as Vignesh was showing about the area geolocation, right? You can look at your sensor version, the geolocation where it is exactly deployed. In our case, it's Asia. The workspace name, what the workspace we have, and the workspace ID, right? And then the license details and things like that. Now, this is the general setting we have spoken so far. The next thing what you're going to talk about is the entity tag. Now, what exactly entity tag means? Entity tag means, providing some sort of tagging so that these sensors or Defender for Identity can understand out of a domain controller which are more sensitive, or which are more sensitive in nature, tagging them. You can tag users, you can tag devices, you can also tag groups, right? Depending on what kind of things we are doing, it's actually gonna tag accordingly. So if I click on the groups, obviously you can see all the, because this is an environment where we have, set up a DC sync, right? So you can see all the groups coming in from on premises. Now, if I go to users and then tag users, it's gonna, list out all the users we have it here, right? We can tag the user. Let's say if you tag this user, add selection, right? Now this user is added as kind of tag as sensitive user, right? The next thing we're going to talk about is honey token. And as you know, you can tag users as a honey token, you can tag devices as a honey token, so that that can be treated, or sensor will understand that as a honey token, and all the logs and things like that will be addressed accordingly. Then there is something called exchange server also, and why it is here, because we know exchange servers are very, very sensitive by nature. The moment you tag it, right, it gets tagged as a high value asset. That means the security monitoring or the pattern monitoring is becomes high for this all exchange servers. Anything little bit happens, you get an alert, or Defender for Identity takes into action. Then this is what the tagging was. Third thing we're going to see is actions and exclusions. So if we want to exclude something from everything, like all the detection rules, if we know like there are some accounts which you don't want to do, not a good example, but maybe break the glass account, or maybe actually that's not a good example, but maybe some sort of service account which does a lot of reporting stuff, right? You want that to be not detected by enumeration and things like that. So in those cases, for all IP addresses, either it's an IP address, it's a device, or it's a you know domain, or whatever you want to kind of exclude it, that's going to get excluded. So this is kind of, I would say, whitelisting things so that your alert is not considered. Now, another thing is exclusion from Defender rules. So if I go and kind of add users, this is a more detailed one. The previous one is kind of a common one. So that means whatever user, domains, device, IP addresses we add here, that is going to get excluded from everywhere, right? All the detection rule, this is what it talks about. And if you really want to exclude this for one particular one, so for example, suspected brute force. So now you might be using an account for pen testing. So that's something you can add that IP address and the device and things like that. So this is where you look at, and and this is very intelligent screen, so that, for example, if I click here, you're going to see add users, add devices, and add IP. That means these are the three type of entities which are basically being monitored by this alert. So you don't need to, kind of do stuff here. But if you click on, let's say, something else, it's only going to share devices and IP address. That means Metasploit is basically, Metasploit doesn't happen with user mostly, the device and the IP address, which makes sense for this case, right? Now, again, summarizing back, we looked at a general one, we looked at the entity tagging, we looked at actions and exclusions. Then we're going to say, okay, what if something happens? So then that's where this health issues and notification. So if you add here, so let's say I add here something like that, and I add it. So what, as a result of that, what will happen is I'm going to receive an email for any health issues and notification. Then we can also do alert notification. That means Defender for identity get an alert, we get an email. The next thing I'm going to talk about is syslog notification. Yeah, if you have syslog configured, you know, you can configure syslog to get your data in, and then you get syslog notifications as well if needed. So that was more of the settings part of the Defender for Identity, starting from onboarding to doing various kind of settings, tagging entities, taking actions, and excluding or whitelisting certain things all around, like globally, or dedicated to one particular, detection rule. Now, having said that, the ideal way is actually you should download the sensor and install technically manually, because DCs are sensitive by nature, and mostly, the number of domain controllers are also less compared to other servers. So if you're installing MDI, most of the customers, they prefer to do it manually, because that's where two things happen. Number one, you do it and you don't miss out any steps. And while installing, if something fails, if you're doing through automation and things like that, you always have a chance that to look at, okay, this is how it installed, and is it checking it or not. And once everything is installed, again, we come back to sensors, maybe give it a few minutes, and it's going to come online, right? So in our case, let's say we are trying to, kind of turning on and off DC, so that it creates this kind of scenario. That's how you see the status. Now, once we have this onboarding done, all the things like setting data, and you can see the status and things like that. Next thing, what you're going to do is, again, going back to identities tab and look at the dashboard. So by the name of it, right? So you can see dashboard basically is going to, dashboard is basically going to do some sort of details here. Now, this cloud users, what exactly that means, I'm going to click that link in a moment, but this is basically all your enterprise applications. So this Defender for Identity, what it did, it treats all the enterprise applications. So wherever there's an identity, that means either it's an application, or it's a user, or it's anything. Like, it can be a managed service identity, it can be an enterprise app, it can be a user, it can be a service principal. So as long as that's an identity, that's where this number is calculated. Hybrid user, obviously, whatever is coming from your hybrid setup. On-premises user, let's say out of 5 we have synchronized 3, for example, right? That's why on-prem numbers are more than hybrid users, and we can click on one of them to see that. Now, coming to the next piece of it, what we see is top insights, because sensors are continuously monitoring it, and that's also, reporting something went wrong. 0 users were identified in a risky lateral movement. That means we are good. Now, there's something wrong as well. 1 user is considered as a dormant account, which is, should be removed from a group. So what happened here is, there's one account we have. What I tried to create is, like, we have used the account and never logged in for, let's say, long time, and then that's also a part of certain security group. So the sensor is able to identify such account by looking at things like, last login date, and when it was last logged in, maybe password reset and things like that. And it technically tells you that you should not use it because it's dormant account, right? And it's, if I click on that, it's going to open up a new screen, and generally it says that it observes a threshold of 180 days to look at the account activity. If there is nothing there, it's gonna mark it as a dormant account, right? And also there are recommended options, you have it here. So I would say this is where the place, I would highlight too, right? Now, coming back to the previous one, if I scroll down a little bit on the health part, right? As you see, deployment of domain controllers is fine. The licenses are good. Wherever there is something wrong, either it will, flag it out as red, or it'll say it's not there, maybe in the gray color. Now, the next one is a secure score, but this is dedicated to Defender for Identity, because we have Defender for Identity sensors deployed here. Now, let's imagine a setup. This is hybrid, right? So this considers Entra ID and also the on-premises domain and the sync accounts. That's where on the right-hand side it says high privileged entities. Like, That's also a thing. It doesn't say it's bad or good, but it just highlights it so that you can see, how many global admin you have. And by default, coming back to the previous screen where we saw the tagging for a particular user, if you are a global admin, you don't need to tag them separately. By default, that defender of identity is going to tag them as sensitive one, right? So three enter ID, there are three users which are basically, global admin environments. Now, obviously, each has its own following link to improve them or to view them all. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, there is no related incident because we're just running this. So uh, if you have some incidents happening or some lateral movement happening in your domain controllers, this identity sensor will show that alert. Obviously, it is tied also with enter ID, so you can see one user at risk. And there's another thing which I want to say, that right now you have only one domain, but if you really want to configure across multiple domains, you're going to see this data more and more going and showing more domains over here, right? So that's about the dashboard. Before I go further, I'd like to quickly go in the left navigation back again and go to health issues. Health issues is as usual, right? Because sensors are deployed somewhere else that's not in the cloud environment. So it makes sense to have a health issues, detected or identified. So it says service account auditing is not enabled. Uh, it is, or it is not configured as required. So it's gonna also tell you the best practices, what we should follow, and these are the things open. That's the global health issues. Now, if I go to sensor health issues, particularly, it's gonna load up and stop. Sensor stop communicating, because as you have seen, right, there are two sensors, which is one is running and one is turned off. That's why it is showing it. Directory services advanced auditing is not enabled, and TLM auditing is not enabled. So it not only monitors the domain controller, it also checks the settings with respect to the best practices. And if something is not right, it's going to flag it out. So instead of you doing proactive stuff in your domain controller, your identity sensor tells you this is what the open points are, and you can take it on your own way of solving them or patching them or updating them, right? So that's about the identity section. Dashboard, health issues, and tools is something we have seen. Now, the next thing I would like to jump onto is we go to, let's try to go to, I'd say, reports. And in reports, you can also schedule reports to yourself to look at how things are. And under general, not under general, I'll scroll down a little bit. So we see identities and report management. In this report, we can say, assign it to someone, and then let's say it's a summary of alert and health issues. If I click on that, I can download the report on a range of 30 days. I can download all 4 reports which are available. Or if I want to schedule the report, right, I can always do that on a daily basis, that I need that report on a daily basis, and then that can be downloaded. So that's how the whole circle begins. So we looked at the tools, coming back to identities. Then we looked at the settings here, which is basically nothing but starting from onboarding and configuring sensors and tagging them the right way. If you want to build honey token, can you have exchange servers running, tag them. You want any exclusions for specific use cases or accounts, that they are used in a particular purpose and for a reason, then exclusion by detection rule, the same reason here. Then we can set up notifications around health issues and alerts and syslog. And then we can look at reports, right? That's the fundamental cycle, of Defender as a whole, Defender for identity, how you deploy and then onboard and get going. Now, we're going to talk further in our next session, but just to give you a sneak peek, as we talk a lot about, advanced hunting, right? So we go to investigation, hunting, and advanced hunting. So here, as we said, sensors deployed, right? Sensor is looking at something, some settings, collecting some data, but what exact data it's collecting, it's really, really verbose, right? So if I look at this left navigation, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit, and then there is a section, I think I skipped the section. It's apps and identities, right? So the last three are, I would say, last four events: identity directory event, identity info, and logon and directory event. Or maybe to be very specific, identity directory event, identity logon info, and identity query event. That's going to pick up all the data, and raw data is ingested here. Now, in case you want to build a detection, you want to do threat hunting, you can always have access to the raw data. And that makes Defender for Identity is really a standout product in a way that, you know, it's not only that you rely on the sensor, that sensor will detect ABC scenarios, and then if you really have a complicated setup, some things are not some of the settings are configured in a DC environment in a particular way, which is not the regular regime, right? You can always query the raw data, write a rule, or even we connect to some SIEM. All this data goes to SIEM. You can correlate and things like that, and you can build your own alert. So with that said, I think that's the summary of the entire Defender for Identity demo, right? So with that said, I'll just give it back to Vignesh further.
All right. Thanks for the detailed demo, Samik. So, folks, ideally, the idea was to show the installation of the sensor happening on the Windows servers, but something got messed up with our environment, so we couldn't log into the domain controllers. Looks like there is something wrong with. So, for some reason, we couldn't do that, but it's just a matter of downloading that sensor and installing it in your domain controllers. Just click and it'll detect whether that is a domain controller or an Active Directory Federation server, and it'll give you the option to choose. So just choose it, install it, and once you're done installing, it'll take about, let's say, an hour or two, and then you'll start seeing that sensor in the Defender for Portal, like the way Samik was just showing in his demo. Right. So let me bring up my screen now. Okay. Yeah. All right. So with that, all I wanted to share is these are some useful links, and of course, I'll put it in the chat, and also I'll have this documented in the YouTube description section also, so that you can go back and look at this. These are the useful links that we want you to take a look at if at all you're planning to start your journey with Defender for Identity. Right. And with that, thanks a lot, folks. This was a very simple session where we just wanted to talk about what is Defender for Identity, what is possible using it, and how you do the initial setup and installation. On the next session, we'll be talking about what is the core capabilities, right? What are the things that you can do using it, how you can, let's say there is a lateral movement happening, how you can figure that out, or if there is an attack, which is there is a compromised account, and how all those things will be showing in our next session. That's more focused upon how the Defender for Identity comes into action. So our next session is planned on 28th September 2024 at 6 p.m. IST. So please make sure that you join that session without fail. So with that, thanks a lot. And if at all you have any questions, now would be the time to either put it in the chat or unmute and you can ask your questions. And this is the QR code. So if at all you want to scan and give your feedback, or if you want to ask questions, you can also put the questions in that, and we'll take it up and answer it in our next session. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for your time, folks. So any questions? That would be the time to bring it up.
Yeah, thank you, Vignesh and Mr. Roy. This one is a new one topic, but